bet you don't have any slugs, Chris. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thank you very
Interesting
much.
question. Thank you. Let's take another.
Felicity Butterfield from West Oxford. Should the need to provide more green vegetables arise, which of the hero plants we now compost or bin would the panel add to the dinner table?
What are you thinking of as a hero plant?
RHS decided that weeds were called hero plants, which I thought was rather a wonderful term. So I go around the garden going, oh, another hero plant, look at that, popping up all over the place.
Chris Beardshaw, fat hen, I think that's another one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's edible.
Yeah, fat hen. And you could also use something like sweet Cicely as well, the foliage and also the flower of sweet Cicely, and the root is also very good as well. Wild garlic. And dandelions as well. But again, it's the very young foliage which is worth just harvesting and throwing on top of a salad dish. Most of the things that have fallen into the weed category have found themselves in a weed category for good reason. They have either been out-competed by other plants, which are more nutritious, easier to grow, more tasty, etc., or they're a downright pest. And once you include them in the garden, it is very, very difficult to get rid of.
If you think where we are in the cultivation of wild plants as far as edible crops, most of us have actually established what we like and what we don't. And there are reasons why we have that selected palette. Outside of that, there are often issues with it, and I wouldn't want bitter cress all over my garden, however much I like a bitter cress sandwich. It depends on where you are in life and how much space you've got. But there are, foraging, of course, it is where we utilise our knowledge for picking wild plants and weeds, etc., for diets. But, would you really want to be eating bitter cress or ground elder week after week after week after week? And I think the answer to that is no.
No.
I mean, Tropilum majus nasturtiums might be useful to you. It's quite a particular flavour, not for everyone, that sort of tart, bitter flavour. But I think of that as a multi-purpose plant because it looks wonderful, I think, and it's useful for ground cover. The flowers are beautiful, and the leaves are edible, as you possibly know. Another example of what I think of as a multi-purpose plant might be something in the pea family, the Fabaceae. So you've got fenugreeks as well as clovers, and the reason these plants are so useful and helpful to the gardener is that they actually fix nitrogen. So they have these rhizobia, bacteria in nodules, and if you actually dig up a clover or a related plant and you look at the roots, you'll notice these little yellowish lumps on there, and that's what those are doing. And so they actually capture the nitrogen from the atmosphere and then sort of hold it in the soil that benefits the other plants. And so you may have heard of a green manure, for example, and you can grow some of these plants that you can harvest if they're edible plants, but they also do something good for the soil. So another thought I had is I haven't grown it, but tiger nut, Cyprus esculentus, it's like a little sedge-like plant that you can grow. It's often grown in the Mediterranean, and that produces these, I think they're sometimes called earth almonds as well, and they're edible, but I've not grown them myself. I don't know if Chris or Christine you have, but maybe give that a try and let us know how you get on with this.
Well, I will. Thank you.
Thanks very much for listening. And who has our final question, please?
Hi, my name's Sarah Calcutt. I have an allotment in South Oxford at Cowmead. I love raspberries, and I enthusiastically planted a load of raspberries, thinking whoopee. They are now invading the raised beds that my husband carefully built, and we're having a terrible time trying to get rid of them. I'm just wondering, is there a way of controlling them a bit? At the moment, we're just trying to dig them out, which is really, really hard work.
Okay.
Any tips?
Christine.
Blood, sweat and tears.
That's what I thought.
Basically. You will leave a bit in. You propagate them by root cuttings, or you can do it by root cuttings, and any damaged particle of root will shoot up and will run and the rest of it. So it's literally physical removal.
I thought you'd say that.
Oh, sorry.
Is there a case then, Chris, for having some restriction around a patch of...
If you were, I'm quite interested to know, do I have to dig them all? Could I keep the
They'll go down and underneath. I've got them from next door coming.
Yeah.
They're related to brambles.
No, I know.
And it really is a case, once they're happy, of treating them as if they are a bramble, really, and just as Christine says, you know, blood, sweat and tears to get rid of them. Sarah, what else are you trying to grow in the raised bed alongside these raspberries?
We've got a lovely bed of asparagus in the bed that hasn't been invaded.
I mean, asparagus could be quite a good competitor, I'd have thought, generally of the things that you're trying to grow, yeah, because once an asparagus gets established,
Yeah.
you know, the shoots that we eat are soft and succulent, but
Yeah.
the mature plant, as you know, is quite a tough old thing. So I think you're choosing the right thing to grow alongside it. So really, I think it is just a case of managing it. But I hope you at least get a good crop from them.
Not really, no.
How long have they been in?
Probably about 4 years.
Now that's interesting.
And they're really...
Then if you're not getting a good crop, I wonder if the soil is particularly rich in nitrates, which is encouraging a flush of leafy growth and getting the stems really going, but it's not investing in the right way in its flowers and then its fruits, which is what you want from it. So can I just ask about, do you feed them anything?
We have hens.
Okay,
And we
then
have fed them with
then I think that is the thing.
with their
what's going
manure.
Yeah, and that's very rich in nitrates. So
Yeah.
I think we may have established the problem. I imagine what's happening is that your raspberries are a little too happy. They're thriving on the high level of nitrates from the manure from the chickens, and that's causing them to have lots and lots of runners and leafy growth. But it's not being compensated for by the flowers and then the fruits, which would come from a high potassium or potentially phosphorus feed. Goodness, all these chickens. If you could try and limit the amount of chicken manure that's reaching those raspberries, if that's at all possible.
Yes, we can, yeah.
I think that might help.
I think one of the interesting things that you might want to explore is the way that one plant might suppress the growth of another plant. So not exactly acting as a herbicide or a pesticide, but certainly able to make a plant really struggle, make a neighbouring plant really struggle. So for instance, traditionally walnuts, and the growth of raspberries and walnuts in traditional gardens is really frowned upon, because the walnut exudes chemicals into the soil via its roots, but also via decaying foliage, and they are known to suppress a whole range of things. But one of the things that's particularly spoken about in Victorian gardening books is raspberries. And you might also want to look at ailanthus as well, Ailanthus ailantissima, which is the most fantastic tree. It's a big tree, but that also has the same ability to be able to suppress plants in its neighborhood. And that's not because it's removing nutrients or because it's changing the environment in terms of light and moisture. It's because of the chemicals which are being emitted into the soil, which suppresses.
I think we're not allowed to kind of plant big trees on the allotment, or I'll get kind of booted out, I think.
But what you can do is you can make tea from the foliage. If you know someone who's got, for instance, a walnut tree, and you gather the foliage of the walnut and then you steep it in exactly the same way as you would comfrey or tea, then you can water that on, and that has a very similar effect. And it's a very natural process. So for instance, a mature oak tree will suppress the germination of seedlings of the same species via the same process. So it's the release of chemicals into the ground, which is controlling other plants.
But I should clarify, that's tea, not for consumption.
Yeah. I mean, you might not want to drink walnut tea. I mean, it would be a very good alternative to self-tanning. So you don't need to go to the tanning studio if you've got walnut tea, because you know you do come out a slightly kind of murky bronze blotchy.
We've taken some interesting routes with that question, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thought there. Thank you. Well, that's all we got time for on this visit to Trinity College, part of Oxford University. Thank you to everyone inside the De Jager Auditorium for looking after us so well, and thank you for listening at home. Next week, we're back at the RHS Chelsea Flower Show, where we'll have our very own garden space across the whole week inside the Great Pavilion. So if you're planning a visit to Chelsea, come and say hello to the GPT team, where we're going to be holding one-on-one sessions with some familiar names. But until then, from me, Peter Gibbs, the panel, Christine Wharton, Chris Beardshaw and Dr. Chris Thorogood, it's goodbye and may the weather be with you.
Gardener's Question Time was produced by Dan Cocker. The assistant producer was Ronnie Prescott, and it's a Something Else production for BBC Radio 4. Well, we've got a short story about a mystery illness in just a moment. First, though, Matthew Bannister is here to tell us about Last Word.
On this week's programme came Shirley Conran, a journalist and author best known for her books Superwoman and Lace. Baroness Doreen Massey, the educator and former director of the Family Planning Association. Beverly LaHaye, the founder of Concerned Women of America, who campaigned to stop the Equal Rights Amendment. And Steve Albini, the controversial musician who produced many influential albums, including Nirvana's In Utero. They're all coming up after the news at 4.
That's in 15 minutes. Now, though, in short works, Hayley Atwell reads An Affliction, a new story from Lottie Mills, the winner of the 2020 BBC Young Writers Award, whose first collection, Monstrum, is published this week.
The sickness begins on a Thursday, an unextraordinary, lukewarm morning in March. The nurses wake Katie Craven to find that her eyes have turned yellow. Gold, really. Every speck of them Midas-touched and blazing, even in the spaces where the whites are. Her pupils are the most unnerving thing of all. They have been stretched vertically, 2 slits from lid to lid, inhuman. Later, the remaining nurses will muse on the strangeness of Katie being the first to show signs. A quiet, obedient child, appropriately unattractive, with her coarse orange hair, her jagged, rot-puckered teeth. Unfortunate, they had always called her, rolling the word across their tongues, savouring the guilty, irresistible cruelty of it. They remark that Katie herself seems unaware of the transformation. They suppose Katie appears more or less mute, to be unaware of most things. They do not see the way her hands dart to a basin of water, a window pane, the cracked mirror in the corner of the senior dormitory, the way they catch sight of their own reflection, pounce on the live, warm, twitching image of it. They have made a fatal misjudgment. Katie is not unaware. What Katie is unsurprised. When breakfast is come and gone, the eyes show no sign of returning to their usual state. The doctor is called. He is quick to arrive, marching up the drive of the St. Francis Invalid Colony with artful efficiency. He glances up at the building as he approaches. This place has always held a peculiar beauty to him, all right angles and uniform brick. It bears none of the infirmity of its occupants, none of their unsightly defects. Inside, it is the same story. He glances admiringly at the neat lines of girls as they are escorted from lesson to lesson, unruly bodies corralled into order by stiff uniforms and stiffer discipline. Any hint of noise, a stifled giggle, an involuntary shriek, is swiftly corrected. It's no cure, of course. Nothing could be. But here, at least, their infirmities are safely contained. To the doctor, there is nothing more beautiful. When did this begin? He asks the matron as he steps into the infirmary. He does not speak to Katie. He can't seem to hold her gaze. Early this morning, the matron says. Is it jaundice, doctor? All the nurses admire the doctor tremendously. He is young, but upright, tidy and certain, neatly parted hair and a suit of dishwater tweed. A man of breathtaking, irresistible ordinariness. He takes a small torch from his pocket and flicks it back and forth across Katie's eyes. They flash as hard and cold as mirrors. A warning. Before he can reply, there is a snort of laughter from the doorway. That's not jaundice. It's followed by a chorus of thumps and shuffles as the speaker moves into the room. He takes in the imprint of the girl's afflictions, the tiptoed drag of the feet, the reckless sway of her torso from side to side. Her clothes sit strangely on her. the usual white pinafore pulled tight over bulging, uncooperative flesh, the incongruously girlish frilled collar, an adult body wrangled into the costume of a child. Alice, the matron scolds, you should be in chapel, young lady. Alice pays her no attention. Even her unsteady body betrays not the slightest flinch. It's not jaundice, she says again. Jaundice doesn't give you fox eyes. Fox eyes. The doctor is struck by the description, by its brutal accuracy. Alice Willoughby, the matron snaps again. Shut now. Alice keeps the doctor pinned with her gaze. Then her face splits open into a feral grin. She lets her tongue protrude and runs it along the front of her teeth in a defiant, ravenous gesture. It's brief, but it's enough to render the doctor uneasy and excited, because her teeth are awfully sharp. Alice returns to the infirmary straight after chapel. A great cacophony heralds her arrival, the percussive thump of her feet punching the floorboards. This time, she's not alone. A younger girl, perhaps 12 years old, trails from her hand, a pale, quiet shadow. They come to an abrupt stop before the doctor, and he takes in the curtained white hair which hangs loose to the girl's elbows, her sightless eyes as Alice guides her into place. Show him, Sophie, she says. Her voice is commanding. She seems almost to be showboating. Sophie lifts one hand up towards her collarbone. The doctor notices that her fingers are webbed, translucent, barely bare skin, as delicate as lace. Then, bashfully, she tugs her hair back and lifts her chin, exposing her neck. It takes the doctor a moment to understand what exactly he is seeing, to grapple with his reeling horror, his reflexive surge of disbelief, to make sense of the inhuman shape, the two sets of swollen ridges which flare and spasm with each breath. Gills. It is catching, he thinks. It must be. He knows a contagion when he sees one, knows a house set alight by sickness, even such a strange sickness as this. The quarantine is first. The infected girls, Katie, Sophie, and Alice, of course, are shut into the infirmary. Only the doctor is allowed in and out, and even he keeps a distance, tries not to breathe their air. Sophie looks awfully small, in that hushed white room, drowning in her too big borrowed nightgown. Katie is harder to make out, perched on a windowsill in the farthest corner, her alien, scar-shaped pupils fixed on the distant woods beyond the window. Alice is the strangest of all. She lays flat on her back on the floor, a luxurious sprawl, arms flung out, sharp teeth bared at the ceiling. Every so often, she'll laugh. It's a grotesque, consuming sound. It ricochets around the infirmary and racks Alice's body in hysterical spasms. The doctor looks down at her. He says nothing, but his lips shift as he runs his tongue along his own blunt, uniform teeth. The other girls he can pity at a distance, but there is something about Alice he dislikes. He feels a wild, irrepressible kind of disgust as he studies the chaos of her body. If he was a bolder man, he might even call it hatred. Outside, the nurses begin the examinations. Every inhabitant of the colony is lined up along the corridor, as they would be for a knit check or a spoonful of cod liver oil. The nurses pick through their hair, feeling along their scalps for budding, velvety horns, measuring claw-sharp nails, startling at the slithering emergence of a long, forked tongue. The sickness has torn through the senior girls' dormitory and the older women's villas. Some of the youngest children seem unaffected, but only a few. Soon the infirmary is seething with it, a yelping, scratching, howling mass of uncontrollably mutating bodies. Barely enough floor space to hold them all. A carnival of chaos. Many tear their uniforms apart, white pinafores shredded to ribbons. Some clamber atop the bed frames with new and terrifying strength. Others leap and swing from the light fittings, shatter the gaslights into lethal confetti as they screech with laughter. Katie Craven, her eyes still yellow as plague, has begun to dance, weaving her arms through the chaos in a silent ballet. The doctor finds his eyes drawn to a spot of stillness, a focal point of solidity amongst the blur. Alice. She is not joining with the others, not as such. She stands right in the thick of it all, eyes fluttering to a close, nose twitching as she catches the delectable scent of the doctor's panic. She takes it all in, an artist absorbing her great masterwork. She is flush with absolute delicious satisfaction. Without quite meaning to, the doctor seizes her shoulders, shaking hard. "What is this?" he cries. "How do we stop it?" She regards him with a kind of disinterest, as if he is barely there at all. It maddens him, so he locks his hand around her arm and drags her towards the door of the infirmary. It's a struggle, and she claws at him with unrestrained rage. But for the moment, he has the upper hand. As he passes the matron, he spits his orders, and she, with pale-faced, terrible resolve, obeys. It has been a long time since he performed an extraction. The tools sit uneasily in his hands. Alice is before him, chin high and proud. She is held down by the nurses, 3 of them, in fact. He can hear a strange sound, a distant keening. Another girl, another procedure. Scales being scraped and prized from skin. Or declawing, perhaps. He looks at Alice again, at her locked shut jaw. The muscles of her face writhe and tick with the force of it. "Open wide," he says. Even to his own ears, the words are jarring. Too clear, too childlike. Alice's eyes flash with amusement. A horrible, hungry glint. Her mouth does open, terrifyingly, unnaturally vast, a wolf's maw. It engulfs his hand completely. Her teeth rest around his wrist, teasingly light. "Please," he whimpers. Another muffled wail echoes from next door. Alice's eyes are locked on his own. Then her teeth clamp down, and his world turns white. The house is empty now. The doctor can feel it before he even opens his eyes. The eerie vacancy of a building drained of occupants. An architectural corpse. He isn't aware of much else, just the shocking wetness of his own blood, and a startling absence somewhere around his right wrist. He has been left on a bed. Someone has pulled the bedsheets to cover him, tucking him in tightly, a mockery of comfort. In a bleary corner of his vision, he can see the dormitory door. He knows, without checking, that it will be locked. All is silent. No more stumbling feet drag across the floorboards. But outside, if he listens carefully, he can hear the distant stampede. The woods alive and wild with brand new creatures. Far away, a wolf howls to the open sky.
Lottie Mills was read by Hayley Atwell, edited by Di Spears, and produced by Justin Owen. The news is next, and then afterwards it's Last Word, and 4:30, Life Changing.
I'm Tim Hartley. And here at More or Less, we have a weekly guide to the numbers and statistics in news and everyday life.
London's average rent is expected to soar to £2,700.
6.5 billion animals pass through the airport.
Only the richest 4% of the population is dated by these stats. But is that really the case?
When those numbers don't seem to add up, we're here to crunch the calculations. No question or number is too big or too small. A new series of More or Less with me, Tim Hartley, starts next Wednesday morning at 9. BBC Radio 4 and on BBC Sleep. BBC News at 4 o'clock. The Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said he'd like to make another cut to national insurance before the general election if the government can afford it. He said Labour would need to increase taxes to meet their spending commitment, but that was denied by the shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves. James Smith of the Resolution Foundation says whoever wins the next election will have some difficult decisions to make.
Both main parties are trying to sound like they're not going to put up taxes. The Conservatives are going furthest by actually cutting taxes, hinting they're going to do more of that and drawing a dividing line with Labour. But they're already putting up taxes by 20 billion, and that's already baked into the plans. And there's also these spending cuts that to Justice, the Home Office, and local government, all of which are extremely difficult to deliver.
The world's top men's golfer, Scotty Scheffler, is facing 4 charges, including assaulting a police officer after being arrested on his way to the second day of the PGA Championship in Kentucky. The American was handcuffed and detained for a short time. He blamed what he called a big misunderstanding about traffic control measures after an earlier unrelated accident. The number of people who've fallen ill with cryptosporidium after drinking contaminated water in South Devon has risen to 46. The boss of South West Water has said she's truly sorry. Hundreds of Border Force officers at Heathrow Airport are to take more strike action in a dispute over rosters. The Public and Commercial Services Union said more than 500 of its members would walk out between the 31st of May and June the 2nd. An asylum seeker from Morocco who killed a stranger in Hartlepool has been sentenced to life in prison and told he'll serve at least 45 years. Ahmed Alid stabbed 70-year-old Terence Carney 6 times last October. Alid told police the attacks were in revenge for the war in Gaza. And the British Museum says it's recovered another 268 missing artefacts. Almost half the 1,500 items it revealed last year had been stolen have now been found. BBC News.
This is BBC Radio 4. A few years ago, a pair of twin sisters travelled to Mexico for a special holiday together. One hot day, they went for a swim in a lagoon, but found themselves in a terrifying fight for survival. We'll find out what happened in Life Changing at 4:30. Now, though, it's Last Word with Matthew Bannister.
On Last Word this week, 2 women with very different views on sex education in schools. Baroness Doreen Massey, who believed it should be taught to all children from the ages of 5 to 18. And Beverly LaHaye, the American evangelical campaigner, who believed it had no place on the curriculum. Also, the controversial musician Steve Albini, who produced many influential albums, including Nirvana's In Utero. But first, Dame Shirley Conrad was the journalist and author who had a huge success with her book Superwoman. It was published in 1975, and according to Dame Shirley's son Sebastian, it was a practical guidebook for the modern woman.
Well, it was a completely new approach. It wasn't Mrs. Beeton. It wasn't, this is how to be the perfect wife. This is how to get the most out of life and enjoy your life, how to live happy and productive life, rather than, being an unpaid slave, as it were.
Any woman who has to cope with her home these days and children is a superwoman because she had to be. I mean, superwoman is an ironic title. As a matter of fact, it's for whoever has to do the system support work in the house, man, woman or child.
My mother was an incredibly practical person. At an early age, I was taught how to change a plug, mend a fuse, and how to sew, how to cook.
Third possibility is to juggle a job and children, which is what I do.
My boys make allowances for my work and help me. Sebastian is the family maintenance man.
I think I've been.
Jasper does all the washing up. He actually enjoys it.
The phrase, life's too short to stuff a mushroom, which she coined, must have absolutely rung around her readers' minds and thought, yes, at last, somebody's articulating how we feel.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point of ironing sheets, you know, if you're only going to sleep on them? And you have just so many hours in the day, and why not use our hours sensibly, you know? She came from an era where women weren't generally taught to use their brains, and she was a very bright person who'd like to use her time productively every day with a new project for us as children, and we're going to be doing something. And so I get this, I mean, you know, how to live one's life productively. I think it was very important things. Don't waste your time doing unproductive things, like stuffing mushroom.
Was she surprised, pleasantly surprised by how successful it was and how well it did?
I think she was pleased how well it did, and the salient quality of it all. I mean, it really did. It was outstanding stuff.
And I was quite interested to notice that both times when I've been touring, more men reported than women. And also they read it in the advertising reports. I think it's most commendable that men have so much moved into the women's field in the home in the last 20 years. I mean, still grumble that they don't do enough, but after all, how much of man's work in the household do women do? I don't see many women at the screwdriver yet.
Shirley was born in 1932. Her father ran a dry cleaning business. Shirley was sent to the prestigious St Paul's Girls' School in London.
My mother was always very proud of the fact that she was a Paulina, and all the friends she made at St Paul's, and she kept contact with St Paul's all through her life.
What do you think she learned there that stood her in good stead later in life?
A sense of independence, and it was clearly after the war, and a lot of women realised that they had to fight their corner, and so a sense of self-worth and a sense of equality of the genders.
After leaving St Paul's, Shirley spent a year at finishing school in Switzerland before returning to London. Shortly afterwards, she met and married the designer Terence Conrad, who was about to start his Habitat furniture business.
He was very charismatic, he was highly intelligent. In many ways, they were very similar.
And they were both significant figures at the time in what was going on in London and in a way in British society, were they not?
They worked together. She was a designer, she had studied textile design, he had studied textile design, and she helped a lot in the creation of the business. I mean, they really were.
Thank you.